walk. It now takes about half an hour car ride to get there. And the people of both villages, in fact, people of the whole area, feel that they've been had their cities destroyed, their towns destroyed, their memory destroyed. So they came and they asked us to give them back their memory, give them back their identity, give them back their history, and a history which is very vague. And so one of the things that other people had decided, which was quite obvious and brilliant, was to fill these great holes with water. And it takes 10 years, they're so big. These are lakes, maybe 10 or 15 miles in size. Fill them with water, and what we decided to do was to signify their logo of all the destroyed towns. Cottbus is the central town, and make a garden, a small garden, a beautiful garden, within the landform which you climb over, which signals to its sister town there and embraces it, would be a landform that would be meaningful to a destroyed history and would be something that they could walk and see their future in. In other words, a garden. Oh, sorry, a garden of their. The actual place is here, but it's about a 100-mile district of destroyed landscape. Will have many lakes within each of the destroyed areas, and so this is a kind of miniaturization of the whole area, so that they have maybe not a complete memory in these landforms and gardens of the past, but they have a memory of their future. Another scheme which I think has implications for a town which has had the Southern Pacific and then the railway that runs to San Francisco today, just beside it, and a railroad which has both brought prosperity and destruction at the same time. It's brought wonderful lumber mills, lumber yards, but it's also brought pollution. It's brought noise, but it's brought, transit. So I think, as I've read about the history of Brisbane, and people have told me, people feel here very ambivalent about the train. They both recognize Southern Pacific in a positive way, and yet realize that it's cut the town off from the bay. It's one more traffic barrier between you and this great view that you have, the number one view in the whole San Francisco Bay. You have, but what are you looking at the whole time? Traffic. So trains is a problem but an opportunity. And here, this old bridge was falling to pieces, and so it was vibrating to pieces, and so Network Rail came to me and said, we've got to do something here. Our lawyers tell us we have to, so tear it down. So we tore it down, and I said, okay, if we're going to tear it down, let's reuse everything. So all the waste and pollution and rubbish of the old bridge was reused, and I designed this little model for the big 90-meter, 270 single-span bridge, largest train bridge since the Firth of Forth, painted red, did a diagonal design. They took that, and it became a kind of program of, well, it's a very complicated mixture of programs of a bloodline of Scotland, because Scottish history is full of killing. It's almost the story of one clan versus another. So I won't go into that part of it. But Scottish identity became an important part of the program here, and Scotland's identity is based up, and its destiny is based up on geography. So, geology particularly, it has, like San Francisco Bay, lots of faults running right through it. Earthquakes are a problem there. I was recently in a small one from your position, 3.9, but it was right underneath me, and it was a big fault. I thought, heaven had fallen in. Anyway, there are 4 great faults in Scotland. England is down here, by the way. It's off the map. I didn't put it in this. This is all ballast from the old railroad. And these point down here. There's kind of a vanishing point here. These rocks are 1.5 billion years old. These are 1 billion. These rocks here, I'm talking about the real plan of Scotland, are 450 million. These are a little bit less. So the rocks, the geological rocks of Scotland, are divided up on these faults, and they became a place of description. And they explained to us in the Scots that if you get into the history of Scotland, it's a complex history, as I say, full of warfare and killing, but geologists tell us that actually these rocks here, which are 1.5 billion years old, were actually connected to the rocks there, which are Iceland, and then the rocks there, which are Nova Scotia, and the rocks here, which are America. So the same rocks go right across the Atlantic Ocean. And if you look at the trilobites, that is the old species that existed for about 250 million years, they had big trilobites here and here and here and here, but when you get to England, they have small little trilobites. Where else do you find big trilobites? Off here in Nova Scotia in America. So we know from these trilobites and these rocks that Scotland was joined up directly with America. So I live in Scotland, and I like to tell them they're really part of America. They don't like to hear this, by the way. But the garden is really a celebration of Scottishness, and here's the old cantilever bridge, which I've done a forced perspective on, and you can see as you walk up this bottom here, and look at the trains coming through at 100 miles an hour, have this amazing experience. You can see these 17 moundettes going off like train cars, each one which signify the high road of Scotland, not the bloodline, but the history of the Scottish Enlightenment, told each is a train car following progressively, because a train is a progressive industrial element, into the future, all of the worthies. This is a garden of Scottish worthies, pulled by a train. And you go up the bum to see the train come through there. So it's a program based, that's looking down the other way, as the Scottish worthies march off into the sunset. You can see the landform with those sweet continuous curves. And the way landforms really are an art of molding the land so that the sun defines it in a dramatic way. Here's a train going by very fast. It's a coal train, incidentally, which had vibrated the bridge. And you can see the origin of the Scottish Enlightenment, started by Francis Hutchinson, the great teacher, with his saying down here, that action is best which procures the greatest happiness for the greatest number. One of his statements. And he taught Adam Smith, who's the next worthy, and Hume, who's the next worthy. So each one learned from the previous one, and each one becomes a train car. And if you look at a train car, they have these slouchy heads based on the old stones from the river, the ballast from the concrete tie bars, the old bridge torn up, and that was extra. James Hutton, the man who discovered the age of the earth, was millions of years, and his famous statement, when you look into the abyss of time, it's upsetting, it's in its infinity. And growing element of Mahonia japonica. So, in other words, the slouching beast of a worthy, all of that is one worthy, is meant to be an enigmatic object, which you slightly identify. I mean, there's no question that these look like animals slouching. And they are pulled. The last worthy, to be a worthy, you have to be dead. So this is Rebecca West. The last one, 1983, she died. And the train, the engine. So you can make, a noise breaker a functional object which cuts down pollution. You can, if you have these trains making noise and smells and so on, it is a possible place where you can use adversity and necessity to, to invent something else. That's the way other parts of the landscape can, on certain days, suddenly come alive. Another scheme I thought would relate to what you're doing is an urban park I'm working on in Milan, which has been under construction for 5 or 6 years. It goes at a snail pace, like all urban landscapes. And for that one, I was very interested in the idea of a time garden, telling the story of Italian time, of this particular area, again destroyed in the Second World War by bombs, next to a very important, extremely large urban hospital, the hypermarket here, which was paying for this whole park here, big mass housing. There was massive housing here, and new office across the site. So a typically very large-scale development, something like 250 meters by 500 meters long, with a geometry which disciplined these landforms and united them in a certain way to do with time. So time became the iconographic program. And while I was researching this, of course, I was very interested in how a city park works, because an urban park is really a kind of organism. It's an institution. It's something that people don't really think about when they build them, I don't think. There isn't a theory of urban parks, and I wanted to sort of find out if there was a theory. So I did some study of it, and I came up with these 10 points. I won't take you through it, but what I found was that the most important thing is high public use. It's quite many of these points are extremely obvious, like you should provide tables and chairs. But it's interesting how many parks don't do that. Anyway, high public use can double the land value of surrounding areas and cut the crime rate. This seemed to be an incredibly obvious point, but it's extremely important. The most important point of all in public parks is to not have them places of crime. Not only can it double the value of the surrounding area, it can actually up it by tenfold, sometimes 100-fold. A good urban park creates value. It is incredibly important. You've got to work on it for 5 to 10 years. You've got, as a municipality, it's a bit like the Bilbao effect. You've got to work with it. You've got to invest in it. You've got to nurture it. You've got to keep it going. At a certain point, if you do that, then the people will take it over. Anyway, I'm not going to take you through that, but that's the idea. These are the landforms. As you can see, urban landforms, very, in a sense, restricted and tight, high, made out of the land being excavated for all of those other buildings that were under construction. There you see it across from one of the skyscrapers that was built. There's the hospital. That was the mass housing of the 1950s. And the high-speed traffic on two sides. So again, I mean, something that you face, and I think you should think about, is how the 101 is one of the noisiest places I have ever been when I walked up. And anyway, we'll come to that in a second. And the time garden in there, a small part of that, worked out in detail, because one of the theories of a large park is that it has to have small gardens in it, at least one, because people go to parks for different kinds of reasons. They go to get away, they go for wilderness, they go to be private, they go with their children. Mothers and children are most of the people who go there. Locals are the other most of the people who go there. And you need in a garden a place of smell, of color, and so forth. So the iconography is based on the 4 seasons and, the different periods of our lives and all sorts of different things, which, by the way, I had to fight for, which were resisted by the client. Because of the hospital, one of the most important rhythms of the universe is, of course, the heartbeat. And so the heartbeat becomes, in the the walkways and so on. But the client went crazy. He said, you know, it's right across from the hospital. You can't do that. But of course, anyway, there's the heartbeat, one of the rhythms. These are the 183 steps that way and 365 the other way. I mean, when you go the whole way. And everything in it has these different rhythms layered on top of each other. So as you walk through, you can see in the detail, in the ornament, in the walk, something that makes you go slow. Festina lente, slows you down. You read and you decipher and you find it. You're at the 352nd day of the year as you're approaching that end in December. So to conclude, I think that an iconography, if one is doing iconic buildings, you understand that most of them are failures. And even the successes have to be high risk in our culture. So my argument is that a cosmogenic art is a possible shared iconography today for those who want to represent things. And when thinking about Brisbane and looking at it, I've only been here 3 days, 2 of them very jet-lagged. I don't have too many thoughts, but I had, when Bill sent me the plans and your strategic plan, I had to think about it, and it did occur to me. I mean, I started reading about San Bruno and the way the mountain is so important, and I read this incredible statement which really turned me around. It said, "This is the largest urban open space in America." You think about it. It's the largest urban open space in America. So, you know, is it true? You know, how big is that? And what would be the second biggest, please? Anyway, you know, it's really interesting that, because it made me immediately think of something I'd never thought of, which is a city I always go to, is Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is my favorite city in a way because it's a very urban city. This is 1 mile. This is the Royal Mile from about there to there. So this is the same scale as 2 miles. From here to here is 2 miles. So this is the same scale, and this is Washington, D.C., and I wanted to show the Forbidden City, and I wanted to show the Louvre to the Arc de Triomphe. Because think, you've got 2 miles in the center, not the center, but in, you know, the city, and it is one of the prime sites in the world. It really is a prime site. These kind of sites don't come up, right? Who has 2 miles in a city? Right by the bay. So I had to compare it to, I mean, I know that the comparison is far-fetched, but think of it, because this is called Arthur's Seat, after King Arthur. And it's a volcano. 270 million years ago, it blew its top, okay? And it is an incredible wilderness volcano. It's about, if you follow my pointer, it goes about like that. So it's uncannily, it's even in the same place as San Bruno. And it's so much better than New York City and its Central Park. I mean, here is real wilderness. And, you know, I designed that landform in that dinky little landform in Edinburgh. And health and safety said you can't make anything that you could fall off that's bigger than this, right? And they have here, everybody can fall off. It's incredible. It's straight down for, you know, about 800 feet. And they do that all the time. Everybody runs all over this without any health and safety problems. Anyway, you know, I just think you've got the same amazing juxtaposition that they do in Edinburgh. So you've got that, the mountain that the butterfly effect saved, and the Mission Blue saved, and became the largest urban space. So when I get back to Britain, I'm going to say this is the largest urban outdoor open space in Great Britain and see what they say, you know, because no one's ever said that. Anyway, I feel there are many possibilities here, many possibilities, but many problems too. And I mean, just if you think of the problems, this Brisbane, old Brisbane, and if you like, the Ridge, have been divided up. The first problem is that, in a way, your city, your town is Humpty Dumpty, because it's got 5 or so parts. Now, it may not matter that particularly, but because you can drive all around it. But if you just think of it as an urbanist, if I think as an urbanist now, I put on my critical hat, you know, you have lots of intense activities here, like the hardware store and your library and your public realm down the main street, which is wonderful. But think of putting Humpty Dumpty together again. You could, if you wanted to, and if you could make a bargain, create a new park center here. If you could get the Keystone clients to help you. In any case, it occurred to me that if high-speed traffic, the world's traffic flying into, you know, a major global airport here, landing here, driving at 60 miles an hour, means for 30 seconds they would see, if they knew to look, and if they had big necks, they could see this amazing sight. But of course it's got a wall, which is very important psychologically, and it's important for the smell and the fumes to keep all of the planting there is a great shield. It's an ineffective acoustic shield, actually. As I've walked many times now along the lagoon, you've got an incredible lagoon, but it's compromised. So, you know, I can imagine that there's the opportunity, since at high speed it takes you 30 seconds, but at most speed, that is when traffic is jammed, it's more like, and we've timed it, Bill and I timed it, it took us about 2.5 minutes to get across there. And I bet when there's traffic jams it takes 30 minutes. But you could have a green thing here, a green thing here, green thing here, green thing here, which said, this is the largest urban outdoor open space in America. And this is the center of the green green movement re-emerging in our time. Something symbolized by the HCP, something symbolized by saving of San Bruno and the butterfly, something symbolized by what, in a way, you have to do anyway, which is deal with ecological problems here. So, in a kind of idea sketch in my mind, I could see that you could build up something here that, or have a little kudzu or something. You could have a high flyer that was really emphasized here in a landform, which repeated, which told people what was happening on this site as a new idea, the idea of, let us say, the landscape and the earth reawakening. If we think of San Bruno Mountain and you think of its mythic qualities and you look at it across the lagoon from there, or you see where the fishermen fish there, or walking it there, bicycling there, you see it has this, it's not Mount Fuji, it's not Vesuvius, it doesn't have an iconic shape, it's a kind of slumbering, slouching, like a dinosaur, like a dragon, like those worthies I showed you, which were slouching, if you remember them, slouching forward. It has a very friendly, dragon-like aspect if you look hard and if you see it in different aspects during the day and night. I've got some nice night photographs. It has an incredible presence at night, by the way, because there's so much ambient light. You feel what the Indians, ancient cultures, must have felt about it. So I saw it as a bear, a bear slouching, sort of lying there, awakening with its eye beginning to open. It does have a physiognomy. It is like an animal, caterpillar maybe. And I think that it could be part of a program of the awakening of the earth. And it could, just thinking of possible narratives, could provide something that keys in to what's happening now in California, in San Francisco, and key up very much to the potentials as the gateway not only to San Francisco, which everybody has to pass almost. It becomes the most important, since 90% of the people will come by car there. It could be the gateway not only to San Francisco, but the gateway the other way, if you think of it. It's the gateway to Taiwan, it's the gateway to China. And curiously, it's a gateway that has many of the aspects of Asian culture in it. In other words, if you think of the rocks and water of the Chinese garden, you think of the iconography of that part of the world. Although it wasn't like Scotland connected to America, I was hoping when I was talking tonight that I could say, you were joined to Asia over there, but Kevin showed, we Googled the Earth, and alas, you weren't connected. But for my metaphor. But I'll tell you, I had another funny idea when I looked at this. I thought, oh my God, look, the site is actually the shape of California itself. So it's California writ small. It's shrunken California. It's already a miniature. And it is kind of an essentialized California. The only problem is, of course, the water is on this side and the land is on this side. So it's facing the wrong way. But I think it's got plenty of possibilities. In fact, so many possibilities, this site, that it's one of the most exciting ideas to think about. Thank you. Oh, yeah, please. Yep.
Right back here. Raise your hand. You got to get the mic.
Thank you. Hello? Hello? Well, I just couldn't help but thinking about James Turrell as you were making your presentation and wondered if you had any comments on his crater project in northern Arizona.
Yeah, the crater project. I've not seen it, but I've looked at photographs, and he's worked on it for something like 20 or 30 years. I guess it is a very cosmic orientation, because you go in, you drive it, you walk into it, and then you see the stars as a kind of dome over your head, and it really relates to you. Have you been there? Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't seen it, but it's certainly part of the same tradition that I'm talking about.
Dr. James, in a generic sense, it seems that the criteria or attributes of an iconic building is that it should be functional, it should have historical or cultural meaning, it should be artistic, most likely sexual or erotic overtones, and it has the power to engage viewers, to give their subjective meaning, controversial, enigmatic. How do you relate these attributes to the Sistine Chapel or the Vietnam Memorial Monument, which is now controversial, made more controversial by the young Asian architect?
Well, I think those are two different, very different examples of, I would say the Sistine Chapel is the classical monumental program, because although Michelangelo reinterpreted the Bible and what the Pope and the iconographers told him to paint, he did interpret it in his special way. and he got into a lot of trouble for doing that, it still was a very traditional iconography, the Last Judgment and so forth, and the whole biblical creation scene, creation of the earth by God. All of that was traditional and shared and understood and readable and comprehensible and public. What was the other example you gave? Yeah, the Vietnam. Now, the Vietnam Memorial is much more, my work is very close to that, because that is both public and understandable in the sense that the people who go in there to find their loved ones or their friends will go in and look for a name, and sometimes I think even rub it, but they take a rubbing from it, which is a very traditional, monumental thing to do in a grave. It's traditional also in its darkness and its blackness, in the way that you go down, as you do in so many traditional memorial structures. You walk in like an ancient prehistoric gravesite. So in a sense, it's like the traditional Michelangelo building task. But in other ways, it's very much like a contemporary landform. Unusual, surprising, a metaphorical cut in the earth. So as you see it, it's a striking and unusual shape. And I think it took a little time after the controversy for people to respond to it. And then it became extremely popular. I think it's one of the most successful contemporary examples of a communicating monument. So it works extremely well, as I think, as an iconic work, because it works in a way that's public and shared, and it works in an unusual personal way as well. Yeah.
You spoke about Brisbane's Humpty-Dumpty nature and our five parks. Have you thought about ways to connect those five parks?
Yes.
Can you tell us what they are?
Yes. Well, I thought that since you have the main streets and they do sort of lead down there, I would say that you really want to create, first of all, you want to move this road, which is much too close to the lagoon. You really want to move it out of there, and you want to create a proper center here, if you can persuade the developer to get key clients on board and to create a proper urban garden in here. My feeling is that you get another public center, you could make that the other center of Brisbane. And you would bring then people from the ridge down into there, and you could make this whole way a public way rather than such a utilitarian way. In other words, I see, a connection between the center here and a center here. So yes, I would say that would pull can pull the parts together.
Please.
I'm from San Francisco, just across the border, and first off, I'm sort of in awe of you, and I'm very much impressed. I'd love to see something happen in Brisbane. It'd be wonderful for all of us. But I'm also thinking, as people are probably tired of hearing me talk about, the whole region here, and I can't help but think of your Edinburgh crater as being like our greater watershed. And I'd really love to see you do something for you. Not only do we have the 660 acres here in Brisbane, but as you know from yesterday's conference, there's also the 700 acres, including, Hunters Point and Candlestick, which are going to be under development, plus Executive Park. If somehow you could connect all that, would you be interested in, San Francisco's a whole different kettle of fish, and they're not as likely to be, be more difficult, but I'd really love to see you take on the whole thing.
That's a utopian idea, yeah.
We're
this follows on from what the lady there was saying. This follows on from what she was saying. There's, I'm not sure if you're aware that there's a trail being built around the Bay Trail, and there's a disconnect between Brisbane and San Francisco part of it. Plus, there, in Hunters Point and that part of San Francisco, there's a number of wild animals, but they can't get down very easily through the bay, with the proposed development through the Baylands down to the other parts of San Mateo County and to the mountain. And it'd be nice to have some sort of a way for species to be able to flow through the land there as far as the animals go. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but eel...
Is there a question here?
No, I was just asking if he was aware of that.
I wasn't aware, but I can see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, and the mountain in itself is very iconic. It's considered by E.O. Wilson, the famous one of the prime hotspots in the U.S. for biodiversity. So it's a very special place in itself. And have you ever considered in your design incorporating native plants that are native to the mountain into your design of gardens in that area?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, there's a theory of ecology called patch ecology, which supports what you're saying, that if you can provide, you know, little runs for animals, you can pull together patches of the ecology and actually support different species. So I agree with that, and bicycle paths and greenways are an idea whose time has definitely come, and I can see what you're arguing for. For sure, you're onto something there. About using indigenous plants, of course. I think one always does where one can. So I would support that. But I'm not, you know, I realize how complicated it is for you in this environment, trying to stop French broom. I live in a culture where, well, Scottish broom is coming in, which I happen to love. So, but I, you know, keep it out, yeah. It's a weed.
In your work, it seems you draw a great deal from the science. You've got DNA and fractals being represented in your landscapes. Do you consider yourself an artist who uses science for inspiration, or do you consider yourself a scientist who's trying to express these things through art?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know, but I think if you... I was going to say that I talked to scientists about this very question, and they say, well, you can't cheat with the double helix. You can't add a third strand. So you can't cheat at poker, you know, you can't cheat at solitaire. On the other hand, after this scientist, famous scientist, said this to me, I saw that there is such a thing as the triple helix, right, strangely. Although it's... we don't know much about it. It may be actually help in the fight in cancer. It's not cheating, actually. It's a way of tinkering with the double helix. But in a way, my view is that the universe is, it's not science so much, it's the universe, which is the important thing. And science is the eye into the universe. Scientists help us, but scientists themselves are very limited in their view of their own, the meaning of things. For instance, they use the phrase selfish gene to talk about genes. That was a popular bestseller by Richard Dawkins, who's very dogmatic about a lot of things. And it's a very unfortunate metaphor, even in its own terms. If you question genes, you know, use the word selfish, you might as well use the word altruistic, since selfish genes are edited out by other genes very quickly, you know, like selfish people often are and often aren't. But the point is that scientists give us really often rotten metaphors, like the Big Bang. You know, 99.9% of scientists use that metaphor, and without thinking. And as soon as you challenge and say it wasn't big, it wasn't a bang, no one heard it, its wave noise form was its least important part. It was really the hot stretch of space, expanding faster than the speed of light. And they say, oh yes, 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 yes. It was the Big Bang. No. In other words, we live in a scientific culture which is, Pentagon language and rather infantile. So I think science is wonderful as the eyes and ears and our, understanding, but its culture is not. And so I think we have to criticize as we use them as a kind of help. So I think of myself as a critic as well as an artist before science.
Right here.
In terms of drawing some analogies for what Brisbane might be able to learn from. Are there some more modern metaphors that you could give us to work from in terms of towns that have rebuilt their center with a mixed-use area?
Well, I haven't got at my fingertips a list of successful and unsuccessful examples, but I will say that Bilbao was an exception. Many cities are trying to replicate it. The Guggenheim Museum, which I would recommend as a possible co-partner in working, but be very wary about, has tried itself to replicate it in Berlin and other cities. I think maybe even in Taiwan, but it hasn't yet brought it off. Now, the success or failure of these things is based, as you're suggesting, on mixed use. And to make it work, although I mentioned the figure of $100 million, which is the figure, seems to be a pretty solid figure, very importantly, why it works is the city of Bilbao puts in 20 million every year to the whole system of the museum and the cultural artifacts around it. So it's what I said about the tender, loving care needed to make a park work. It's not just getting the right building and the right keystone client, both of which are absolutely essential, I think. I mean, you've got to really work on many things at once, and you've got to be lucky. But if I were thinking of Brisbane, I would think if you could entice the client to get 3 or 4 major players, one, get Al Gore and company, and the Green Revolution, and get something from the Pacific Rim. After all, Taiwan has the greatest collection of Chinese art in the world in its new version of its museum. And the Chinese themselves are incredible. Now, emerging into the world of culture in a very major way. And it's their next big, well, it's 10 years away as a national movement, but as individuals, they are now major collectors. And they will be looking for, a place here in San Francisco. If you think of I know I'm not answering directly your question, but I'm talking about Brisbane. But it is mixed use. It's one part culture, one part ecology, one part probably cutting-edge businesses here, and a fourth part. And I think if you could get those keystone clients, and you can think hard about them, I can, you have a great possibility here to turn what is one of the greatest potential sites into a future, which is incredible.
Go.
I'm asking a question behind technology itself. Try to paraphrase it. Is an icon by any other name still an icon? In other words, in the beginning you talked about Palace de Concord and the various names it had within a fairly short period of time in history. How important is the name to the icon?
The naming of the Place de Concorde, you mean?
To any icon. Because what you demonstrated there was it changed, it seemed to change many times.
Well, I was making that point in the context of the decline of the monument. The decline of the monument. And in a monument, the Place Louis XV had a statue of Louis XV. And the Place de la Révolution had a guillotine. And other name changes came with other visible monuments. And today, we want our monuments. It's no question we want monuments. There's no question that hasn't ended. But the names we want are multiple names, so that if you are asking for an icon, it's important, I think, that you name it. But it's also important that it has more than one overtone.
Yeah, I think my question spoke to iconic buildings and the selling of their names. When you think of an iconic building in a city now, it's usually a stadium. That's a big public iconic building, and they sell the name. So my question is, how important is a name to an iconic structure, and is it so important that you could use the name to raise the structure? Do you put names on your structures, or would you feel that the structures would be devalued if they were sold, their names were sold?
Well, I do think that you have to sell iconic buildings 20 times just through the food chain to get it built. But if you think of the gherkin, you've already got the answer there, because no one called it the gherkin. In fact, they tried to unname the gherkin, but it didn't work. And they renamed it 4 times. Its official name is 30 St. Mary's Axe, which is its address. It was called the Swiss Ray building. The Swiss Ray was its other official building. It had 3 other official titles. None of them caught on. And everybody still calls it the gherkin, even though it doesn't look like a gherkin. So, you know, no, we don't control. Icons do run away with us. And the successful ones run the fastest.
One more question. Everybody who hasn't asked a question? All right, last question.
In your sketch, you made a striking statement about San Bruno Mountain, that it has iconic quality or mythic quality. Do you think that's still true when the mountain will be covered with houses and buildings?
No, I think you raise a very important point there. And I said it doesn't have the iconic shape of Mount Fuji or Vesuvius, so it's not an obvious icon. I say, but it's, if you were try to turn it into an icon, I think things would have to be done, because at the base of it, you know, there's that corporate building, which is white. I can't remember what it's called, VWR, which in a way, you know, competes with it. And then, you know, if, for instance, I was looking at your painting up on the middle of the main street, up in that, when you go up half the street in Brisbane and you turn left and you go into
The market. Yeah.
the market. And I thought, ironically, this says it all, both positively and negative, about Brisbane, because here, you know, it's a wonderful mural telling the histories with the Oleani, is it? Or anyway, the ancient Native Americans 5,000 years ago with San Bruno Mountain in its pristine, iconic shape, and just so well demonstrated in that painting. But there's a pipe right in front of the painting of the Native Americans. Then, And if you can see it, because there's so many cars parked in front of the mural itself that you can't see the mural. I mean, that's a kind of mythic problem of Brisbane. And as I was looking at, no, really, when I was looking at San Bruno and at night and in these various lights, when it's really dark and you can't see the white building in front, and you just get a silhouette reflected in the lake, it is magically powerful. And I was looking at there, and I was thinking of the slouching dragon and its eye. But the eye is actually a house. There's a house built right where the eye is. This big, huge house. And I thought, gosh, this must be the best view in Brisbane. You know, really high wilderness all around, and this one house spoiling the mountain for us. Then I thought again, and I thought, it's funny, everybody must come to dinner there and go and say, well, now let's see the best view of the bay. And they go in there for dinner, and what do they see? All these cars roaring in front, and nothing but trains and cars and noise, you know. And so there's a way in which you've got Shangri-La here, you've got Bali High, you've got the best place in the world, and at the same time, somehow it's been rubbed out. So I think, you know, it's a problem. There's no easy answer, but I think if you could get, you know, if you could do some things here, you've got to get clients who are going to pay for this initial thing. You could actually cut the noise by a lot in important places, and you could make that lagoon and that mountain like Hangzhou in China, you know, heaven above, Hangzhou below. It's magical. I've been to Hangzhou. I've seen it. It's there. The basics are there, but you've got to work. You've got to do some expensive things. Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
What year were you?
I'm sorry?
What year were you at Harvard?
Oh, I was at 61 in English and 65 in architecture. So, Adams House.
wasn't the policeman's fault in all the traffic roar. Instead of shouting halt when he saw her, he shouted Amo, 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 Amo. Even the ice cream man, free ice creams by the score. Instead of shouting, but if he can, one look at her, he shouted Amor, Amor, Amor. All over town and went that way. Everybody took off the day. The philosophers understood how good was the good, 'cause she looked so good. The poor stopped taking less. The rich stopped needing more. Instead of shouting no and yes, both the naughty and her shouted out. Her stay in town was cut short. She was dragged to court. The judge said she disturbed the peace, and the jury gave him what for? The judge raised his hand, and instead of desist or cease, the judge came to the stand, took her hand, and whispered, Night was turning into day. She walked alone away. Never see that town again. But as she passed the church house door, instead of singing Amen, the choir was singing.
Scotland, a strathspey, an old one, probably from around the 16th century. Actually, that's pretty modern for this program, I guess. Followed by a Shetland Island tune called the Scalloway Lasses, and then a tune from North England called the Sportsman's Hornpipe. And then we'll bomb straight on into Blythe and Mary Was She, which is a setting by Robert Burns, a great poem. we'll do now some tunes from Scotland, the Strathspey, an old one, probably from around the 16th century. Actually, that's pretty modern for this program, I guess. Followed by a Shetland Island tune called the Scalloway Lasses, and then a tune from North England called the Sportsman's Hornpipe. And then we'll bomb straight on into Blythe and Mary Was She, which is a setting by Robert Burns, a great poem.
cake, and as thin as rubber tape, that axe. He would raise that big black hat to the big shots of the town, raise their hats right back, never knew they were bowing to black hats. I'm talking about night in Rotterdam, where the Rhine people of all the town would find what they could in the night neighborhood of black hats. There were women in the windows with bodies for sale, dressed in curls like little girls in little dollhouse jails. When the women walked the streets with the beds upon their backs, who was lifting up his brim to them? Black Max! There were looks for sale, the art of the smile. Only certain people want that mystery mile. Artists, charlatans, vaudevillians, and of mathematics, acrobatics, and civilians. There was knitting needle music from a lady organ grinder with all her sons behind her. Marco, Vito, Benno, was he strong, though he walked like a woman? And Carlo was 5. He must be still alive. Ah, poor Marco had the sip. And if you didn't take the terrible cure in those days, you would craze and die when you did. And at the coffin, before they closed the lid, who raised his lid? Black Max. I was climbing on the train, one day going far away to the good old USA, when I heard some music underneath the tracks. Standing there beneath the bridge, long black jacket, broad black hat, made the harmonica one hand free to lift that hat to me. Black Ich fühl meine Seele tauen, in Kelch der Liebe hinein. Die Liebe so fliege tauchen, ein Lied von den Liebsten mein. Das Lied soll schauen und beben, wie der Kuss von ihrem Mund, den sie mir einst gegeben, im Wonnen als süßer Stund. Die Rosen, die Liebe, die Taube, die Sonne, die alle liebesvoll, die schnell, ich lieb alle, die Kleine, die Feine, die Reine, die Heine, sie selber alle liebevoll, ist Fuß und Liebe und Tausend, ich lieb alleine, die Kleine, die Feine, die Reine, die Heine, die Heine.
early Middle Ages that are presumed to be instrumental in that they are untexted and they are relatively unsingable. All of them are in the form of the next piece, which is called an estampille. Throughout this program, you'll hear instrumentals that we've made up or that we've adapted into a medieval form, maybe taking a vocal piece and then mushing it into this form that you'll hear now. But this piece we're going to play is actually one of the pieces that we have left to us in manuscript, and it's called Cominciamento di Gioia, the beginning of joy, presumed to be an Italian piece because of its name, although it's in the British Library.
hab ich hier gestanden, mein Ziel